Level up.
Level up, 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 level up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Level up.
What's up? What's up? My name is Tiana Marshall, and I am the founder of Tiana's Tea. And today I'm going to talk to you about something I was thinking about yesterday. I'm going to get right into it. I'm not going to prolong the time. And I'll start with something I wrote down. It says, be real careful that you don't become too good to cover and pray for the mess of the person who was good enough to cover you and pray for you through your mess. Now I want you to think about that. See, now you could be the person who needed prayer, or you could be the person who's needed prayer from. But either way, I want you to think about it. Be careful that when you needed prayer, that person was good enough to pray for you and cover you. But now that you're on your feet and they need prayer, make sure you're not judging them. And now you're too good to cover them and pray for them, although they covered and prayed for you. And I think sometimes we go through that, and it causes us to get bitter and resentful. And I tell you why it causes you to get bitter and resentful. Because you forget why it was that you covered and prayed for that person in the first place. It was out of obedience. See, when you do what you do out of obedience, then when you don't get I don't want to say expected, but when you don't get the results, the natural results, or the outcome that you think you should get, then you get bitter, you get resentful, you get mad, you get upset, you get frustrated. But when you remember why you were being obedient to God, then you're reminded you got seed in the ground. And though you didn't see that seed producing that person, it is producing somewhere. Because whenever you sow a seed, it's going to produce. So that prayer and covering that you prayed for that person that may not be covering and praying for you right now, God got somebody that's covering and praying for you. Trust and believe. But I want to show you an example. I want to give you concrete examples, scriptures to back it up, and then we're going to get right into it. So if you go with me to Luke 22 and 32, the first person that I could think about that actually went through such betrayal or, covering and praying for someone, and then when it was time for them to cover and pray for them, they were denied, was Jesus and Peter. So you look in Luke 22 and 32. If you go there, I go a little bit above that. If you go to Luke 31, go to Luke 31. 22 and 31. 22 and 31. You'll see that there's 4 Gospels, and in Matthew, a little bit before this, it talks about Jesus was talking to the disciples, and he was telling them about, basically he was predicting his death. And he told them, that they were going to all fall off on account of him that night. And Peter was like, God, they might fall off, but I ain't going nowhere. I'm not going to leave you. So we look at verse 31. And Jesus says, Simon, and when it leaves off in Matthew, it leaves off with, it picks up in Luke. Simon, Simon, this is Jesus to Peter. Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. All of the disciples. But he's talking to Simon specifically. And he says, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen the brothers. Now, a side note, I want you to notice something, because sometimes we get, I can imagine Peter in that moment, knowing who Jesus was, and, Peter was a little prideful. So, when Jesus was praying specifically, and Jesus said, Peter, I have prayed for you, it really went to Peter's head, because, sometimes, Peter leaders tend to hold Peter's close to them because they know that Peter's going to watch out. They're going to have their back. They're oftentimes their armor bearers, their coverings, So the leaders oftentimes hold Peter's close to them. And if Peter's aren't careful, they will become prideful because of their position. And so I can imagine, amongst all of the other disciples, when Jesus called Simon, Simon, I have prayed for you, Peter was probably too busy getting the big head that he didn't hear what Jesus said in the rest of that sentence. Because what Jesus said to Peter was, Peter, when you turn back. And I said to myself, what do you mean when Peter turned back? Peter is here. Where is Peter going? Peter is by your side. Peter got your back. Peter was trying to cut off somebody's ear. Jesus, what are you talking about when you turn back? He said, Peter, when you turn back, you will strengthen the brethren. And what Jesus was saying in that very moment is that, Peter, it's going to happen. I'm not praying for you right now because right now you're confident. I know you got my back. I know right now that you haven't been tried yet. So you're talking a real good game. But when you get tried, you gonna fall. But I'm praying that you don't stay there. I'm praying that your pride don't keep you down, that you don't feel so guilty, that guilt does not overwhelm you so much that you betrayed, that you denied me, that you will go back and strengthen the brethren because they're going to need you. They're going to need you, Peter. You the strong one. They're going to need you. Okay? So, Peter says, and so when Jesus says this to Peter, Peter says, but the Bible says on verse 33, but he replied, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. This is Peter talking. Peter got to talk a good game. Now, Jesus just prayed and covered Peter. And Peter talking a good game. God, I got you. I got your back. You my dog. And Jesus said to Peter, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And then we go over here to Luke 22, and I believe it's 54 through 62. I'm not going to read all 54 through 62. But this is after Judas betrays Jesus. And we know this. And so some stuff happened in between there. And Peter held up his end of the bargain because when the soldiers came for Jesus, Peter cut off the ear, because Peter is like, that's my rider. Don't try Jesus, try me. You know what I'm saying? I'm the one with the sword, try me. So, all these things has happened in between there. And still, Jesus knew there was a purpose. Jesus knew why he had covered and prayed for Peter. He knew all these things had to happen. He was being obedient even unto death. And so I say again to you as a reminder, don't forget why it is that you did what God told you to do in the first place. And it was not for man. It was not so that when you need them, they can have your back. No, it was you being obedient unto God. And so we go to verse 54 and says, then they seized Jesus, and they led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. This was the same Peter a few scriptures ago that said, Jesus, I got you. I'm going with you to prison, even to death. But when they was taking Jesus away, Peter was following at a distance. Sometimes you'll have people in your life, they're going, girl, I got you. I got your back. I'm going to go the distance with you. I'm not going to drop you. I ain't going to let you fall. I'm going to cover you. I'm going to pray for you. Because I remember when you did this and you did that for me. And when you get in trouble, they are there at a distance. You got to look real high out there in the crowd to see where they at. But you can't get frustrated. You can't get bitter. You can't get resentful, because you got to remember why it is that they were assigned to you. You got to remember why it is that you covered them. You got to remember why it is that you prayed for them. You got to remember why it is that God told you to bring them into the fold. And so the Bible says, and when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard, and they sat down together, Peter sat down among them. And then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, "This man also was with him." And Peter said, "But woman, I do not know him." Denial number one. And later, a little later, someone else saw him and said, "You are also with them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." Denial number two. Verse 59, and after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly, this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered what the Lord said, and how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. The guilt consumed Peter. See, the reason that guilt consumed Peter, because Peter's heart was with God. His heart was with Jesus. He wanted to be that ride or die. When he said what he said, he really meant what he said. But he didn't realize that what he said was going to come to pass. He didn't realize that, following Jesus was going to lead him to prison and to death. He didn't know that. And so, although Peter was ready to fight for Jesus, he really wasn't ready to die for Jesus at that moment. He didn't know that death was going to be a possibility. He thought Jesus was just talking. He didn't see that far into the future. And there are people that will start out with you in the beginning, and they will have your back, and yes, and rah, and yes, because you ain't got dirty, and they see you for where you are, and they see you covering, and they see you praying for people, and they see you doing great and wonderful things, but they have not seen the persecution ahead. They have not seen your name being drug in the sand ahead. They have not seen the trials and the tribulations that one day you're gonna have to face, and they don't realize that, yes, if you're gonna stand with me in the limelight, you're gonna have to stand with me in the darkness. You're gonna have to go all the way with me. And so though their heart is with you and they really meant what they say, they don't know really how far this life is going to take them. They don't know how far this commitment is going to take. They didn't know that following Jesus was going to ultimately lead him to prison and to death. And so though Peter talked a good game, Peter meant what he said. He just didn't know that what he said was going to come to pass. And it's why Jesus could not be mad with Peter. He could not be bitter or resentful with Peter, because Peter did not know. Peter meant well. Peter's heart was with God. Peter cut the soldier's ear off because they tried Jesus. He loved him. But yet and still, when Peter was caught off guard, he didn't have an answer. He didn't know. He wasn't quite ready at that time. He didn't have enough time. Jesus said that night. Peter didn't know that that night meant that night. He didn't have enough time to prepare himself to go to prison and perhaps die with Jesus. He didn't see that. And so how could Jesus be mad with Peter when he knew that Peter loved him? And so his prayer was for Peter is that when the guilt came over him, because he knew he was going to betray him, and he knew that he would feel bad because he really didn't want to do it, he prayed that Peter would remember that he loved him and that his faith in him would not fade away, and that condemnation would not consume him to the place of death as it did Judas. And that Peter would go back and be able to strengthen the brothers, because the brethren was going to need Peter. The brethren was going to need Peter to stand in the gap and to encourage them and to trust in them. Because remember, Peter was the one that believed in God. Peter, the Bible says that Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church. Peter was unmovable. Peter was unshakable. His faith in God was second to none. And so the brethren were going to need Peter to strengthen them. Peters are the ones that are so close to you that they see your heart. They know they see your tears. They see what you are going through. And so Peters can convey to the others the heart of the leader. But we have to be very careful that we don't put too much on Peters, because Peters mean well. Peters talk real good game. They got a good fight game. But sometimes they get caught off guard and they don't know what is going to befall them. So I say all that to say this. Peter talked a good game and Peter meant what he said. But Jesus remembered why it was that God called Peter into the fold, why God chose Peter to be a disciple. And so when Peter denied Jesus, and Jesus already knew Peter was going to deny him, Jesus had already prayed for Peter ahead of time, knowing that he was going to deny him, because he knew that Peter had a greater purpose in this piece of the puzzle. He knew that Peter had a great call on his life, and he knew that the gospel was going to need Peter. The brethren were going to need Peter. So in the beginning, I said, be careful that you don't become too good to pray for the mess of the person that was good enough to pray for you and cover you when you were going through your mess. Peter's pride almost got the best of him. But because the one he denied had prayed and covered him, he was able to recover and strengthen the brethren. Remember, there is a bigger picture. You cannot become bitter, frustrated, and resentful when those who stood with you once denied you, because you never know why that denial took place. They were not ready for what was about to come. Yes, you were, because God showed you, but they were not ready. And so though that denial may be temporary, you got to always have your heart open and ready to receive them back in the fold. When Jesus looked at Peter, I'm sure Jesus did not look at Peter with condemning eyes, but Jesus looked at Peter as if to say, it's okay. I got you. I got you, Peter. I already prayed for you. I've already covered you. They're going to need you. I need you to recover quickly from this. And I need you to do the same, sis. Don't get stuck at that place of bitterness and resentment, because when you covered them, they didn't cover you. God had a greater purpose in mind. And remember, you got seed in the ground. And though Peter can't pray for you at this time, there are angels praying for you. God is covering you. Jesus is standing in the gap for you. You will get through this. And guess what? Peter will be on the other side. I love you. This is Tiana with Tiana's Tea, and I'm signing off. Peace.
Level up, level up, level up, level up, level up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Watch me. Level up, level up, level up, level up, level up.